Picture this. You're at a party, and someone accidentally bumps into you, spilling their drink. Without thinking, you immediately say, "I'm sorry," even though you didn't do anything wrong. Or maybe you're that person who reads a text message 50 times, analyzing every word, every punctuation mark, searching for hidden meanings that probably aren't even there. Perhaps you've been told you're too independent or hard to get close to, and you wear it like a badge of honor. But late at night, there's this quiet ache you can't quite explain. What if I told you that none of this is random? What if the reason you are the way you are today started decades ago, in a childhood that might have looked perfectly normal from the outside? The truth is, not being loved as a child doesn't leave visible scars. It leaves something far more subtle and far more lasting. Let's talk about something we rarely discuss openly: emotional deprivation in childhood. And before you think this is about extreme abuse or neglect, hold on. I'm talking about something much quieter, much more common, and honestly much harder to identify. This is about the child who had food, shelter, and safety, but whose emotional world was a desert. The parent who was physically present, but emotionally absent. The home where achievements were praised, but feelings were dismissed. The family where love felt conditional, like you had to earn it through performance, perfection, or simply by not being a burden. The ancient philosopher Seneca once observed that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. But what he didn't address is this: what happens when a child's emotional reality actually is suffering, but no one acknowledges it? When your pain is invisible to everyone, including yourself. This matters more today than ever before. We live in a world obsessed with productivity, self-optimization, and appearing fine on social media. But beneath millions of carefully curated posts are people who learned early that their emotional needs were inconvenient. People who became experts at hiding their hunger for connection because asking for it felt dangerous. The psychological community calls this attachment wounding, but I think that term misses something crucial. This isn't just about how you attach to others. It's about how you learn to abandon yourself. And that abandonment doesn't end when childhood does. It follows you into every relationship, every achievement, every quiet moment when you're left alone with your thoughts. Today, we're going to explore how an unloved childhood shapes your entire life. Not to make you feel broken, but to help you understand why you've been trying so hard to feel whole. The adaptation, when children rewrite their own worth. Here's something that will probably hit you harder than you expect. When a child doesn't receive love, they don't stop needing it. That's biologically impossible. Instead, something far more devastating happens. They stop believing they deserve it. Think about it. A child's brain isn't developed enough to think, "My parents are struggling with their own emotional issues." Instead, the child's mind makes a simpler, more painful conclusion. Something must be wrong with me. The German philosopher Schopenhauer wrote extensively about suffering, arguing that life is essentially characterized by striving and pain. But what he missed about childhood suffering is this: it doesn't just hurt in the moment. It becomes the lens through which you see everything that comes after. When you're young and you reach out for comfort but get coldness, when you express excitement but get indifference, when you cry but no one comes, your brain doesn't file this under "Mom was having a bad day." It files it under "I am not important enough to be comforted." And here's where it gets really interesting. That conclusion, as painful as it is, actually serves a purpose. It gives the child control. Because if you are the problem, then theoretically you can fix it. You can be better, quieter, more impressive, less needy. You can earn the love you're missing. That's the cruel logic of the unloved child. They sacrifice their sense of inherent worth to maintain the illusion of control. And that trade, it lasts a lifetime. The nervous system never forgets. Let's get into the science for a moment, because this is where it gets wild. Your nervous system, that ancient primal part of your biology, develops its threat detection system in childhood. And when love is unpredictable or absent, your nervous system learns to stay on high alert. Psychologists call this hypervigilance, but let me translate that into real life. It's reading tone of voice like you're decoding a foreign language. It's analyzing a friend's facial expression for micro signs of rejection. It's that gut-wrenching feeling when someone takes 3 hours to respond to your text and your brain immediately jumps to, "They hate me." Your nervous system became a radar for abandonment. And as a kid, that was smart.
When love equals survival, you need to detect threats early. The problem is that radar doesn't turn off when you become an adult. It just keeps scanning, keeps searching for proof that you're about to be left. So when someone genuinely loves you now, when they're consistent, kind, present, part of you doesn't celebrate. Part of you panics because your nervous system is whispering, this doesn't match what we know. Something's wrong. When will the other shoe drop? This is why people who grew up unloved often sabotage good relationships. Not consciously, but subconsciously, chaos feels familiar. Inconsistency feels like home. And real, stable love, that feels dangerous. It feels like setting yourself up for the worst disappointment of all. The paradox, becoming the most loving person. Now here's something that might surprise you. People who grew up without love often become the most generous, empathetic, self-sacrificing adults you'll ever meet. They become the friend who always shows up, the partner who remembers every detail, the person who gives and gives and gives until there's nothing left. Why? Because they know exactly what absence feels like. They've felt the cold. They've known the hunger. So they become absolutely determined to make sure no one else feels that way. The French philosopher Montaigne wrote about how we become what we repeatedly do. And for the unloved child who grows into an adult, what they repeatedly do is overgive. They become emotional first responders, relationship fixers, the ones who make everyone else feel seen while remaining invisible themselves. But this is the tragic irony. All that giving, it's not really about the other person. It's about proving to yourself that you're not like the people who failed to love you. It's about performing worthiness on an endless stage, hoping that if you give enough, you'll finally feel deserving of receiving. And what happens? You attract people who are happy to take. You end up exhausted, resentful, and still somehow convinced that you're not doing enough. Because the real truth you're running from is this: you don't need to earn love. You needed to receive it freely, and you didn't. And no amount of giving now will ever fill that old hole.
The performance of existence. Let's talk about something you probably do without even realizing it: performing your right to exist. This shows up everywhere. You apologize for asking questions. You preface your needs with, "I'm sorry to bother you, but..." You downplay your accomplishments while obsessing over your failures. You're uncomfortable with compliments, but devastatingly fluent in self-criticism. The Italian political philosopher Machiavelli understood power dynamics, how people position themselves to survive in hostile environments. And that's exactly what you learned to do. You learned that love was political. It had to be negotiated, strategized, earned through tactical behavior. So you became useful. You became easy. You became low maintenance. Not because that's who you are, but because that's who you needed to be to avoid rejection. You learned to make yourself smaller, quieter, less demanding, because the message you internalized was clear: your needs are burdens. Fast forward to adulthood, and you're probably wildly successful in some areas of your life. You're the reliable one at work, the responsible one in your family, the achiever who keeps hitting goals. But if you're really honest, those achievements don't feel like victories. They feel like evidence. Evidence that you're finally enough. Evidence that you've earned your place. Evidence that maybe, just maybe, you deserve to be here. But here's what nobody tells you. You can't achieve your way into feeling loved. You can't perform your way into worthiness. Because the lack you're trying to fill isn't about what you do, it's about what you didn't receive when doing nothing should have been enough. What your body remembers that your mind forgot. There's this strange thing that happens when you grow up unloved. You become disconnected from your own body, because your body holds all the feelings you weren't allowed to have. The anger, the sadness, the loneliness, the desperate clawing need for someone to just see you. So you learn to live in your head. You intellectualize, you rationalize, you explain away your pain with logic and perspective. Other people had it worse. I'm being dramatic. It wasn't that bad. But your body knows the truth. It knows in the tightness in your chest when someone gets too close. It knows in the exhaustion that no amount of sleep fixes. It knows in the way your stomach drops when you're vulnerable and waiting for a response. It knows in the chronic tension you carry, like you're always bracing for impact.
The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung talked about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject and hide. But for someone who grew up unloved, the shadow isn't just anger or darkness, it's need itself. The need to be held, the need to be chosen, the need to matter without having to prove it first. You shoved that need into the basement of your consciousness because it felt too dangerous, too humiliating, too likely to be disappointed. But need doesn't disappear. It just finds other ways to express itself, in perfectionism, in people-pleasing, in the gnawing sense that something fundamental is missing, but you can't quite name what it is. That missing thing? It's the felt sense of being inherently valuable. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. And until you reclaim that, until you stop abandoning the needy parts of yourself the way others once did, you'll keep searching for wholeness in places it can't be found. So where does all of this leave you? If you recognized yourself in any part of this, if you felt that uncomfortable flutter of recognition, I want you to know something important. You're not broken. You never were. What you are is adapted. You developed survival strategies that made perfect sense for the environment you are in. The hypervigilance, the people-pleasing, the emotional armor you wear, all of it was intelligent. It kept you safe when safety wasn't guaranteed. But here's the thing about survival strategies. They have an expiration date. What protected you at 7 doesn't serve you at 37. The path forward isn't about fixing yourself. It's about updating your internal map. It's about teaching your nervous system that the war is over, that love doesn't have to be earned, and that your worth isn't up for negotiation. This happens slowly through small moments of choosing differently, through letting someone's kindness land without immediately finding a way to repay it, through sitting with discomfort instead of performing your way out of it, through speaking your needs even when your throat tightens with fear. And maybe most importantly, it's about becoming for yourself what you needed from others. That might sound like self-help cliché, but it's actually the most radical act you can perform, offering your younger self the compassion, the patience, the unconditional presence that was missing. Not someday, today. Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Well, now you know. Now it's conscious, and that means you have a choice about what comes next. If this video resonated with you, do me a favor, hit that like button. Not for the algorithm, but as a small act of acknowledging your own story. You clicked on this video for a reason, and that reason matters. And here's something I genuinely love to know. What's one pattern from childhood that you recognize in yourself today? Maybe it's apologizing too much. Maybe it's struggling to accept love. Maybe it's that radar for rejection we talked about. Drop it in the comments below, not just for me, but for the person reading who needs to know they're not alone in this journey. If you want more content exploring psychology, philosophy, and the invisible wounds we all carry, subscribe to this channel. We're building a community of people who are willing to look at the hard stuff, to name what's been unnamed, and to choose healing over hiding. And here's a simple practice you can try this week. Write a letter to your younger self. Not the polished version, the real one. Tell them what they deserve to hear. Tell them they weren't too much or not enough. Tell them that the love they craved wasn't a weakness, it was proof of their humanity. You don't have to show it to anyone, just write it, and notice what happens in your body when you do. That's it for today. Take care of yourself, and I mean that literally. You deserve the kind of care you've been giving everyone else. I'll see you in the next one.